The morning sun cast long shadows across the mining colony of Kepler 442b as Hana Kim walked toward the diplomatic hall. Her boots clicked against the metal walkway, and she carried a small device that would help her translate the complex sounds the Velthari made when they spoke. Today was important. Today would decide if humans and aliens could live together on this distant world. Hana was only 24 years old, but she had spent 3 years learning the language of the crystal beings who lived beneath the planet's surface. The Velthari spoke in musical tones that sounded like singing glass. Most humans heard only noise, but Hana could understand every note. She was the bridge between two very different worlds. "You ready for this?" Taemin Park asked as he caught up with her. He was 4 years older than Hana and worked as the colony's security chief. More than that, he was like a big brother to her. He worried about her safety more than his own job sometimes. "I think so," Hana replied, adjusting the translator on her belt. "Elder Sithara promised this would be a peaceful meeting. The Velthari want to share their mining knowledge with us. It could help both our peoples." Taemin nodded, but kept his hand near his weapon. "I still don't like how some of them look at us. That Kethmore character gives me bad feelings." Sora Lee appeared from behind them, carrying recording equipment. At 19, she was the youngest communications officer in the colony, and Hana's best friend. "Don't worry so much, Taemin. Today is about peace, not fighting." The diplomatic hall was a large dome built specifically for meetings between humans and Velthari. The walls were made of clear material so both species could feel comfortable. Sunlight streamed through, creating rainbow patterns on the floor. Commander Wook Choi was already inside, checking the translation systems one last time. He was a serious man in his mid-40s who ran the colony with firm but fair leadership. "Hana, are you certain the harmonics are calibrated correctly?" "Yes, sir," Hana answered. "I've tested them 3 times this morning." The Velthari began arriving through the underground tunnels that connected to the hall. They moved like living crystals, their bodies catching and reflecting light in beautiful ways. Elder Sithara led them, her ancient form glowing with wisdom earned over centuries. Behind her came the moderate faction members who wanted peace with the humans, but Hana noticed something wrong immediately. Kethmore and his followers entered from a different tunnel. They should not have been here. This was supposed to be a meeting only with the peaceful Velthari. "Commander," Hana whispered urgently, "Kethmore's faction wasn't invited to this ceremony." Wook Choi's face grew tense. He signaled to Taemin, who quietly moved his security team into better positions around the room. Elder Sithara began the ceremony with traditional harmonic greetings. Her voice rang like silver bells, and Hana translated smoothly. "She welcomes us as friends who share the same sky and the same hope for tomorrow." The peaceful exchange continued for 20 minutes. Elder Sithara spoke of cooperation and mutual benefit. She offered to teach humans how to mine without damaging the planet's crystal formations. In return, humans would share their technology for processing rare metals. Hana felt proud as she translated each word perfectly. This was why she had worked so hard to learn their language. This moment of understanding between species was worth every sleepless night studying harmonic patterns. Then Kethmore stepped forward. His form was darker than the others, like smoky quartz instead of clear crystal. When he spoke, his tones were sharp and angry, cutting through the peaceful atmosphere like broken glass. He says. Hana began translating, then stopped. Her face went pale. "He says humans are poison to this world. He says we steal the planet's voice and replace it with machine noise." Elder Sithara's harmonics rose in alarm. She was trying to calm Kethmore, telling him this was not the time or place for such words. But Kethmore was not listening. He raised his crystalline arms, and the other extremist Velthari moved with him. Hidden devices emerged from their bodies, bioacoustic weapons that Hana had never seen before. "Get down!" Taemin shouted, but it was too late. The weapons fired sound waves designed specifically to destroy human vocal cords. The frequency was perfect for maximum damage, calculated to silence the species they saw as invaders. Hana saw Sora directly in the path of the deadly sound beam. Without thinking, she threw herself between her best friend and the weapon. The acoustic blast hit her full force, tearing through her throat like invisible knives. The pain was beyond description. It felt like swallowing fire and ice at the same time. Hana fell to her knees, her hands clutching her throat as blood seeped between her fingers. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her voice was gone. Chaos erupted in the diplomatic hall. Taimin and his security team opened fire on the extremist Velthari. The peaceful faction members scattered, their harmonic cries of fear echoing off the dome walls. Commander Choi was shouting orders that Hana could barely hear through the ringing in her ears. Sora crawled to Hana's side, tears streaming down her face. Hana, stay with me." But Hana could not answer. She could not even whisper. The battle was short, but brutal. Kethmore's faction had planned this attack carefully, but they had underestimated human military training. Within minutes, most of the extremists were dead or fleeing back through their tunnels. Kethmore himself escaped, but not before speaking one final message. His harmonics rang with satisfaction as Elder Sithara translated in horror. "The voice speaker is silenced. Now the poisoners will leave our world, or more will suffer the same fate." As medical teams rushed to help the wounded, Hana lay on the cold floor of the diplomatic hall. The place that was supposed to represent peace between species had become a battlefield. Worse, the bridge she had spent years building with her voice was now broken. Taemin knelt beside her, his face twisted with rage and grief. "We're getting you to medical right now. You're going to be okay." But Hana knew better. The bioacoustic weapon had been designed too perfectly. The damage was permanent. She would never speak again. The Velthari extremists had achieved exactly what they wanted. They had stolen her voice. As the medical team carried her away, Hana saw something in Taimin's eyes that frightened her. It was not just anger or sadness. It was something darker and more dangerous. Something that promised the extremists would pay dearly for what they had done. The age of peaceful coexistence on Kepler 442b was over. In silencing their voice speaker, the Velthari had awakened something in humanity that they did not understand, something that would soon teach them the true meaning of consequence. 3 days had passed since the attack, and Hana Kim lay in the medical bay staring at the ceiling. The white walls seemed to press in on her, making her feel trapped and helpless. Every time she tried to speak, only air came out. The silence was worse than the pain. Young Su-han, the colony's head medic, checked her throat again with gentle hands. He was a kind man in his 20s who always tried to stay positive, but Hana could see the sadness in his eyes. "The damage is complete," he told Sora Lee, who sat beside Hana's bed holding her friend's hand. The bioacoustic weapon was designed specifically to destroy human vocal cords. "I'm sorry, but her voice is gone forever." Sora squeezed Hana's hand tighter. "There has to be something we can do. Surgery, implants, anything." Young-Soo shook his head slowly. The weapon didn't just damage her throat. It changed the cellular structure. Even if we had the technology, which we don't out here, the damage cannot be fixed. Hana closed her eyes and felt tears run down her cheeks. She had spent years learning to speak with the Velthari. Now she could not even speak with her own people. The extremists had taken more than her voice. They had taken her purpose, her identity, everything that made her who she was. In the hallway outside, Taemin Park paced like a caged animal. His friend Jinwoo Nam sat nearby, cleaning his engineering tools with sharp, angry movements. Jinwoo was 30 years old and had served with Taemin in the military before coming to the colony. They had been through many dangerous situations together, but nothing like this. "I should have seen it coming," Taemin said for the 100th time. "I should have protected her better." "You couldn't have known," Jinwoo replied, but his voice was cold. "Those crystal bastards planned this whole thing. They wanted to hurt her specifically." Commander Wook Choi approached them with a datapad in his hands. His face looked older than it had 3 days ago. "I've been analyzing the attack patterns. This wasn't random violence. Kethmore's faction studied our diplomatic procedures for months. They knew exactly when and where to strike. And they're still out there," Taemin growled, planning their next move while Hana suffers in silence. The commander nodded grimly. Elder Sithara sent a message through the emergency channels. "She Says her people are horrified by what happened. But Kethmore has gone deep underground with his followers. She can't control them. That evening, the second attack came. The colony's alarm system screamed through the corridors as Velthari extremists struck the civilian quarters. Unlike the calculated assault on the diplomatic hall, this attack was pure brutality meant to terrorize. Taemin and his security team responded within minutes, but the damage was already done. 12 humans were dead, including 3 children who had been playing in the recreation area. The extremists had used the same bioacoustic weapons, but this time they had not aimed for vocal cords. They had aimed to kill. As Taemin surveyed the carnage, something fundamental changed inside him. The protective instincts that all humans carried deep in their DNA suddenly roared to life. These were not just colonists under his protection anymore. They were his pack, his family, and someone had dared to hurt them. Jinwoo found him standing over the body of 8-year-old Minho, a boy who had always waved at the security teams during their patrols. They're going to pay for this, Jinwoo said quietly. His voice carried a deadly promise that Taemin had never heard before. Yes, Taemin agreed. They are. The change in the human survivors was immediate and frightening. Within hours of the second attack, Taemin had organized his security team into something that resembled a military unit more than colony guards. They began studying Velthari tactics, learning their movement patterns and adapting human weapons to work in the crystal caves where the extremists hid. Daehyun Lim, a weapons specialist who had been working on mining equipment, joined the team without being asked. At 35, he was older than most of the security force, but his knowledge of explosives and energy weapons made him valuable. I've been analyzing the bioacoustic weapons they used, he told Taemin during a late-night planning session. I think I can modify our sonic tools to work against their crystal bodies, turn their own technology against them. Young Minho Kang, barely 22 and fresh from basic training, volunteered for the most dangerous scouting missions. His youth and quick reflexes made him perfect for reconnaissance in the narrow tunnel systems. The transformation was not just in their tactics. It was in their very nature. They moved differently now, with a coordinated precision that seemed almost supernatural. When one team member spotted an enemy, the others knew instantly without any communication. They had become something more than individual humans. They had become a pack. Hana watched this change from her hospital bed with growing alarm. Sora brought her updates every day, and each report made her more worried. The gentle security chief she had known was becoming something darker and more dangerous. She tried to write messages to Taemin, begging him to stop the escalation before it went too far, but when he came to visit her, she could see that he was beyond reasoning. The protective fury in his eyes burned like fire. They hurt you, he said simply. They hurt our people. That cannot stand. Hana wrote frantically on her tablet. This isn't what I would want. Please find another way. Taemin read her message and his expression softened for a moment, but then he shook his head. I'm sorry, Hana. But they made their choice when they attacked innocent people. Now they have to live with the consequences. The first coordinated strike came exactly 1 week after the civilian massacre. Taemin's team had spent days mapping the tunnel systems and identifying extremist positions. They moved like ghosts through the crystal caves, using modified sonic weapons that shattered Velthari bodies from the inside. The attack was surgical and brutal. 15 extremist fighters died without ever seeing their attackers. Kethmore's forces suddenly found themselves being hunted by predators who understood their weaknesses better than they understood themselves. Elder Sithara sent desperate messages to the colony, begging for restraint. She promised to help find peaceful solutions, to bring Kethmore to justice through Velthari law. But her words fell on deaf ears. The humans had tasted blood, and they liked it. When news of the successful strike reached the medical bay, Hana felt a chill run through her body. The gentle people she had worked with for 3 years were becoming something she did not recognize. They were still human, but they were also something more primal and terrifying. The worst part was knowing that this transformation was happening because of her, because they loved her and wanted to protect her. They were becoming monsters. Outside her window, she could see Taemin training with his team in the courtyard. They moved with deadly grace, practicing techniques designed to kill crystal beings as efficiently as possible. The man who used to worry about using too much force in routine arrests was now teaching others how to become perfect killers. The age of peaceful coexistence was truly over. In trying to silence humanity's voice, the Velthari extremists had awakened something far more dangerous. They had awakened the human capacity for controlled, methodical vengeance, and Hana Kim, lying silent in her hospital bed, realized that her voiceless existence had become the rallying cry for something that might consume them all. 2 weeks after the civilian massacre, Captain Yoon Ji-sung's military transport ship dropped out of hyperspace above Kepler 442b. She was 40 years old and had seen combat on 6 different worlds, but the emergency message from the mining colony had shocked even her battle-hardened mind. Colony under attack. Diplomatic personnel targeted. Request immediate military support. The message had been short, but the files attached told a darker story. 12 dead civilians, a silenced translator, and something about the human survivors that made Earth Command very nervous. As her ship entered the planet's atmosphere, Captain Song reviewed the personnel files one more time. Taemin Park had been a good soldier before joining the colony security force. His record showed steady promotions and commendations for protecting civilians. Nothing suggested he would become what the reports now described. The colony landing pad was different than she expected. Instead of the usual civilian, workers, armed humans in modified mining gear waited for her arrival. They moved with military precision, checking sight lines and establishing security perimeters without being ordered. Taemin met her at the ship's ramp. Captain Song had seen his photograph in the files, but the man standing before her was changed. His eyes held a cold intensity that reminded her of predators she had encountered on hostile worlds. "Captain Song," he said with a respectful nod. "Welcome to Kepler 442b. I wish the circumstances were better." "Chief Park," she replied, studying his face. "I need a full briefing on the situation. My orders are to assess and contain the threat." "Of course, but first, would you like to meet Hana Kim? She's the reason we're all here." Captain Song followed Taemin through the colony corridors. She noticed how other humans reacted to his presence. They did not just respect him as a security chief. They followed him like pack animals following their alpha. When he moved, they adjusted their positions automatically. When he looked in a direction, they watched the same area without being told. The medical bay was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Hana Kim sat in a chair by the window, looking out at the mining operations in the distance. She was smaller than Captain Song had expected, and seemed fragile after her injuries. But when Hana turned to look at them, Captain Song saw intelligence and determination in her eyes. This was not a broken victim. This was someone who understood exactly what was happening around her. Hana wrote quickly on a tablet and showed it to them. "Hello, Captain Song, thank you for coming. I hope you can help us find a peaceful solution." "I'm going to try," Captain Song replied. "But first I need to understand what we're dealing with." Over the next hour, Taemin explained the situation with calm, military precision. He showed her maps of the tunnel systems where the extremists hid. He described their weapons and tactics. He outlined the strikes his team had conducted and the results they had achieved. What disturbed Captain Song was not just the efficiency of the operations, it was how Taemin's team had learned to think like their enemies. They understood Velthari psychology better than xenobiology experts. They had adapted human weapons to exploit crystal being weaknesses. They moved through alien terrain like they had been born to it. "How many extremist fighters have you eliminated?" she asked. 43 confirmed, Taemin answered without emotion. Kethmore and his core group are still active, but their numbers are dropping fast. "And civilian casualties on your side since the massacre?" 0. Captain Song raised an eyebrow. 0? In 2 weeks of active operations against an enemy that knows this terrain better than you do? "We adapt quickly," Jinwoo Nam said from across the room. He had been silent during most of the briefing, but now his voice carried a quiet pride. "Humans learn from their mistakes. The Velthari don't seem to understand that." That evening, Captain Song witnessed something that would stay with her for the rest of her career. Alarms sounded throughout the colony as Velthari extremists attempted another raid on the power station. But instead of chaos and confusion, the human response was like watching a perfectly choreographed dance. Timon did not shout orders or coordinate positions. He simply moved, and his team flowed around him like water finding the best path. Daehyun Lim appeared at the power station's main entrance with modified sonic weapons. Young Min-ho Kang emerged from the shadows behind the attackers. Jin Woo-nam cut off their escape route before they even knew it was blocked. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. 8 extremist Velthari died without inflicting a single human casualty. The coordination was so perfect that Captain Song wondered if the humans were using some kind of telepathic communication device, but when she checked, she found no technology that could explain what she had witnessed. They were simply reading each other's intentions and responding accordingly, like a pack of wolves hunting together. After the attack, Kethmore sent a message through Elder Sithara requesting a negotiation. The extremist leader was finally ready to discuss terms for ending the conflict. He offers to spare the colony in exchange for complete human withdrawal from Velthari territory, Elder Sithara translated during a tense communication session. He says the voice speaker was a warning. If humans leave now, no more will be harmed. Captain Song looked at Tai Min, expecting him to discuss the proposal. Instead, he simply stood up and walked out of the room without saying a word. 3 hours. Later, explosions echoed through the crystal cave systems beneath the colony. Taemin's team had launched their most ambitious operation yet. Using Jin Woo's engineering expertise, they had mapped the entire underground network and identified Kethmore's main stronghold. The attack was a masterpiece of adapted human warfare. They used the Velthari's own harmonic communication against them, broadcasting false signals that confused and separated the defenders. Daehyun's modified weapons created resonance frequencies that shattered crystal formations, collapsing tunnel sections and trapping groups of extremists. When the assault was over, Kethmore's fortress was destroyed. Most of his followers were dead or scattered. The extremist leader himself barely escaped through a hidden passage, wounded and alone. But Taemin's team left him one final message. They captured Kethmore's second-in-command alive and sent him back with words that would become legend among the Velthari. Tell your leader that negotiation time is over. He took our voice speaker's gift of speech. Now he learns what humans do when their family is threatened. We do not bargain with those who hurt innocents, we hunt them until they are gone. Captain Song found Taemin in the colony's main hall, staring at a photograph of the 12 civilians who had died in the massacre. Minho, the 8-year-old boy, smiled up from the picture with gap-toothed innocence. The extremists wanted to negotiate, she said quietly. They should have thought of that before they murdered children, Taemin replied. His voice was calm, but Captain Song could hear the steel underneath. And if Earth Command orders you to stand down? Taemin looked at her with those predator eyes. Earth Command sent you to assess and contain the threat, Captain. The threat is Kethmore and his followers. We're containing it. That night, Captain. Song wrote her report to Earth Command. She tried to explain what she had witnessed, but words seemed inadequate. How do you describe the moment when ordinary humans transform into something more dangerous than any alien species she had encountered? The mining colony personnel were still recognizably human. They still cared for their wounded. They still mourned their dead. They still protected their innocent. But they had also become something else. Something that adapted and learned and hunted with terrifying efficiency. Something that would not stop until every threat to their pack was eliminated. In her final paragraph, Captain Song wrote, "Recommend immediate reinforcement of colony defensive capabilities. Not because the humans cannot handle the threat, but because I am no longer certain we can handle what the humans are becoming." In the medical bay, Hana Kim read the combat reports on her tablet and felt a deep chill in her heart. The gentle people she had worked with were winning their war against the extremists, but in doing so, they were losing something essentially human, and it was all happening because they loved her too much to let her sacrifice go unpunished. 1 month after Captain Song's arrival, Hana Kim had learned to communicate without words. She used hand signals with Sora Lee, wrote messages on her tablet, and sometimes just looked at people in ways that made them understand her thoughts. But the silence still felt like a prison. The colony had changed around her. What used to be a peaceful mining operation now looked like a military base. Human patrols moved through the corridors at all hours. Weapons that had once been mining tools were now instruments of war, and at the center of it all was Taemin Park, who had become something she barely recognized. He still visited her every day, still asked about her health and comfort. But there was something different in his eyes now, something cold and calculating that reminded her of hunting animals she had seen in nature documentaries back on Earth. "The extremists are getting desperate," he told her during one of his visits. "Our intelligence suggests they're planning something big. Captain Song thinks they might try to hit our supply lines." Hana wrote on her tablet, "Maybe this is the time to try talking again. Elder Sithara could help arrange a proper negotiation." Taemin read her message and shook his head slowly. They had their chance to talk, Hana. They chose violence instead. Now they live with the consequences. Before Hana could write another response, alarms began blaring throughout the colony. But these were not the attack alarms they had grown used to. These were the emergency evacuation signals that meant something had gone terribly wrong. Jinwoo Nam burst into the medical bay, his face pale with panic. "Taemin, they have her. The extremists took Hana." For a moment, Taemin did not understand. Hana was sitting right there in front of him. Then he realized that Jinwoo meant they had taken her from somewhere else. "The medical transport," Sora Lee said, her voice shaking. "Hana was supposed to go to the advanced treatment facility this morning. I was with the convoy when they attacked." The truth hit Taemin like a physical blow. The extremists had captured a medical transport carrying what they thought was Hana Kim. But it was actually Dr. Ji-won Park, a medical researcher who was roughly the same size and build as Hana. In the confusion of the attack, the Velthari had taken the wrong human. Captain Song arrived at the medical bay with tactical displays and rescue plans already prepared. "We have their location. They're holding her in the deep crystal caves about 20 kilometers from here. My team can have a rescue operation ready in 6 hours." "6 hours is too long," Taemin said quietly. Something had shifted in his voice, making it sound more dangerous than Captain Song had ever heard. "Chief Park, I understand your urgency, but we need to plan this carefully. The cave system is complex, and they'll be expecting us." Taemin looked at her with those predator eyes. "Captain, with respect, your team doesn't know these tunnels like we do, and they don't understand what the extremists just did." "What do you mean?" "They took one of ours. They made the mistake of taking family." Within 2 hours, Taemin had assembled his team for what would become the most legendary rescue operation in human military history. But this was not the careful, methodical planning that Captain Song expected. This was something primal and instinctive. Dae-hyun Lim had modified their sonic weapons to create harmonic feedback loops that would shatter crystal formations from the inside. Jinwoo Nam had mapped every tunnel, ventilation shaft, and structural weakness in the target area. Young Minho Kang had volunteered for the most dangerous infiltration route, crawling through passages barely wide enough for a human body. But the most unsettling part was how they communicated during the preparation. They barely spoke at all. Instead, they seemed to read each other's intentions through subtle gestures and shared looks, like a pack of wolves planning a hunt. The rescue began at sunset, when the crystal caves would be darkest, and the Velthari would have the advantage of their natural light-sensing abilities. But Taemin's team had learned to turn every Velthari advantage into a weakness. They moved through the tunnel system like ghosts, using the aliens' own harmonic communication against them. Jinwoo had created devices that could mimic Velthari, speech patterns, sending false messages that confused the guards and drew them away from their posts. The infiltration was perfect. Minho Kang reached the holding chamber where Dr. Park was kept without being detected. Dae-hyun Lim positioned his sonic weapons at key structural points throughout the cave system. Taemin and the main assault team prepared to strike from 3 different directions simultaneously. When they found Dr. Park, she was injured but alive. The extremists had been questioning her about human military capabilities, not realizing they had captured the wrong person. She looked up at Minho with tears of relief in her eyes. "We're getting you out of here," he whispered. "Just stay quiet and follow my lead." But as they began moving toward the extraction point, something went wrong. Kethmore himself appeared with a group of his most loyal followers. The extremist leader had been waiting for exactly this moment. "So the humans come to save their voice speaker," Kethmore said in his harsh, crystalline tones. "Perfect. Now I can finish what I started." He raised the same bioacoustic weapon that had destroyed Hana's voice, aiming it directly at Dr. Park. But before he could fire, Taemin emerged from the shadows behind him. What happened next would be talked about in whispers among both human and Velthari populations for generations to come. Taemin did not use weapons or technology. He used his bare hands and a fury that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. The fight was brutal and one-sided. Kethmore was larger and stronger than any human, with natural crystal, armor that should have been impossible to penetrate. But Taemin fought like something that was no longer entirely human. He found every weakness in the alien's defenses, exploited every moment of hesitation, and showed no mercy. When it was over, Kethmore lay broken on the cave floor, his crystalline body shattered in ways that would take months to heal. The other extremists fled in terror, abandoning their leader and their cause. "Tell your followers," Taemin said to the defeated alien, "that this is what happens when you threaten human family. We don't just protect our own. We become something you cannot understand or defeat." The rescue team extracted Dr. Park without losing a single human life. But the cost of the operation went beyond casualties. Something had changed in Taemin during that fight with Kethmore, something that worried even his closest allies. Back at the colony, Hana watched the rescue teams return and felt a mixture of relief and fear. Dr. Park was safe, and the extremist threat was finally broken. But the man who had saved her was not. The same person who had promised to protect the colony months ago. Taemin had become something more than human, something that could adapt to any threat and overcome any enemy. The question that haunted Hana was whether this transformation was temporary or permanent. Captain Song filed her final report to Earth Command that night. Her conclusions were simple and terrifying. The colonial situation is resolved. The alien extremist threat has been neutralized. However, I strongly recommend continued monitoring of the human personnel involved in combat operations. They have demonstrated capabilities that exceed normal human parameters. She did not mention in the official report what she really thought: that humanity had always carried the potential to become the galaxy's apex predators. It just took the right circumstances to awaken that potential. And those circumstances were simple: threaten their family, and watch them transform into something that would hunt you to the ends of the universe. In her private notes, Captain Song wrote, "They took her voice, thinking it would silence humanity's influence on this world. Instead, they awakened something that speaks much louder than words. They awakened the human capacity for protective fury. The extremist Velthari would never threaten the colony again." But Hana Kim, sitting in her silent room, wondered if the price of safety had been too high. Her protectors had become something magnificent and terrible, and it was all because they loved her too much to let her sacrifice go unanswered. 6 weeks after the rescue operation, Ambassador Hyunwoo Shin arrived from Earth with orders to restore normal diplomatic relations. He was a skilled negotiator who had resolved conflicts on 12 different worlds, but nothing had prepared him for what he found on Kepler 442b. The mining colony looked peaceful from orbit. Ships came and went on schedule. Production reports showed steady progress. But when his transport landed, Ambassador Shin immediately sensed something different in the air. The humans who met him moved with a quiet confidence that seemed almost predatory. "Welcome to Kepler 442b, Commander Wook Choi said as they walked through the colony corridors. "I hope your journey from Earth was comfortable." "Thank you, Commander. I've come to assess the current situation and establish new protocols for human-Velthari relations." "Of course, but first there's someone you should meet." They found Hana Kim in the colony's new communication center, working with Sora Lee on a complex translation project. But this was not the traditional vocal translation work she had done before. Instead, they were developing a system of visual and emotional communication that went deeper than spoken words. When Hana saw the ambassador, she stood and bowed respectfully. Then she gestured to a large screen that displayed symbols and patterns that seemed to pulse with meaning. "She's created a new form of communication," Sora explained. "It's not based on sound or words. It's based on understanding intention and emotion directly." Ambassador Shin studied the display with growing amazement. "This is remarkable. How does it work?" Hana touched the screen, and the patterns shifted to show images of humans and Velthari working together in harmony. Then the images changed to show conflict, pain, and transformation. Finally, they showed a path forward that neither species had considered before. "She's saying that losing her voice taught her something important," Sora translated. "Sometimes the most powerful communication happens in silence. When words fail, intention remains." Dr. Soo-Jin Park, a xenopsychologist who had arrived with the ambassador, watched the demonstration with professional fascination. She had come to study the reported changes in human behavior, but this was beyond anything in her research. The trauma of losing her voice appears to have awakened latent human abilities, she told Ambassador Shin privately. "But it's not just Hana. The entire colony population shows enhanced cooperative instincts and strategic thinking." "Enhanced how?" "They function as a collective unit while maintaining individual personalities. It's like they've evolved a form of group consciousness that activates under threat conditions." That evening, Elder Sithara requested a meeting through the emergency communication channels. She had been silent since Kethmore's defeat, but now she wanted to discuss the future of Velthari human relations. The meeting took place in the rebuilt diplomatic hall, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of cautious optimism, there was a sense of mutual respect built on understanding of consequences. Elder Sithara's crystalline form seemed dimmer than before, as if the conflict had aged her beyond her centuries. When she spoke, her harmonic tones carried sadness and wisdom in equal measure. "The extremist faction is finished," she said through the translation system. "Kethmore and his followers have been exiled to the deep caverns where they can harm no one. My people understand now what happens when humans are threatened." Ambassador Shin nodded diplomatically. "We're pleased that the conflict is resolved. Earth Command is prepared to discuss new cooperation agreements." But Elder Sithara was looking at Hana, not the ambassador. "I came to speak with the voice speaker, not the diplomats." Hana approached the alien elder and placed her hand on the translation interface. The patterns that appeared on the screen were unlike anything they had seen before. They pulsed with forgiveness, understanding, and something that transcended both species. "She forgives us," Elder Sithara whispered in amazement. "After everything we did to her, she forgives us." But the patterns continued, showing something more complex than simple forgiveness. They showed how the attack had changed both species, how the humans had discovered their true nature as protectors, how the Velthari had learned the price of threatening innocence. "She's saying that her silence became a teacher," Sora translated, her voice filled with awe. "That sometimes you have to lose something precious to discover something more valuable." Tae-min. Park entered the hall quietly, but his presence was immediately felt by everyone in the room. He had changed the most of all the humans, becoming something that was both more and less than what he had been before. "Elder Sithara," he said with respectful courtesy. "I'm glad you came. There are things that need to be said." The alien elder studied him carefully. In her ancient wisdom, she could see what he had become. Not just a human anymore, but something that embodied humanity's deepest protective instincts. "You have become legend among my people," she said. "The human who hunts in silence and strikes without mercy. They call you the Shadow Walker." "I became what I needed to become," Tae-min replied simply. "When someone threatens family, humans change. We become whatever is necessary to protect those we love. And now, the threat is ended." "What do you become now?" Tae-min looked at Hana, who was watching the conversation with those intelligent eyes that had learned to see beyond words. Now I become whatever she needs me to be. Guardian, protector, or simply the man who makes sure she's never hurt again? Ambassador, Shin stepped forward, sensing an opportunity for formal resolution. Perhaps we can establish new protocols that prevent future conflicts. Create buffer zones, communication procedures, early warning systems. But Elder Sithara shook her head. Protocols and procedures are for species that do not understand each other. We understand humans now. You are pack hunters who become unstoppable when family is threatened. That understanding is better than any treaty. Over the following days, a new relationship emerged between the two species, not based on formal agreements or diplomatic treaties, but on mutual recognition of each other's true nature. The Velthari learned to respect humanity's protective instincts and never again threatened human innocence. The humans learned to channel their pack abilities constructively, becoming the galaxy's most effective defenders of peaceful species. But at the center of it all was Hana Kim, whose silence had become the most powerful voice in the colony. Her new communication system spread throughout human space, teaching others how to understand intention and emotion without words. Dr. Sujin Park studied the phenomenon for months before reaching her conclusion. Hana's trauma activated dormant human neural pathways that allow for enhanced empathic communication. But more than that, her example showed the entire colony how to function as a coordinated protective unit while maintaining individual humanity. Captain Song, preparing to return to Earth, filed her final assessment. The Kepler 442b incident has revealed previously unknown human capabilities. When properly motivated by threats to their community, humans can evolve tactical and strategic abilities that exceed baseline parameters. Recommend immediate study for military applications. But she added a personal note that would never appear in official records. They didn't just protect one person, they became something greater because one person was worth protecting. That's the real lesson here. Humans don't just fight for survival, they transform for love. On her last night at the colony, Hana stood on the observation deck looking out at the stars. Sora joined her as she did every evening, reading the emotions in her friend's face without needing words. Tae-min appeared beside them, as he always did, a guardian who would never again let harm come to those under his protection. His team was scattered throughout the colony, but Hana knew they were all connected by something deeper than communication devices or tactical coordination. They had become family in the truest sense. Not just people who cared for each other, but people who would transform themselves completely rather than let family be harmed. Ambassador Shin's final report to Earth Command was brief. The colonial situation has been resolved through methods that exceed conventional diplomatic parameters. The humans of Kepler 442b have developed enhanced protective capabilities that make them ideal guardians for frontier settlements. Recommend expansion of the colony and use of their personnel as trainers for other defensive operations. But the real story was simpler than any official report could capture. They had taken her voice thinking it would silence humanity's influence. Instead, it had awakened something far more powerful. It had awakened the human promise that family will always be protected no matter the cost. And in the silence that followed, that promise spoke louder than any words ever could.